Right at the end of Acts chapter 4, we are introduced to a Levite of Cyprian birth whose name is Joseph. What's fascinating about that fact is none of us know him by the name Joseph. We know him by the name Barnabas, son of encouragement. We meet a man whose character traits and his actions in life are so encouraging that the apostles actually call him by a different name. All right, this is the only time in the book of Acts that we see him referenced as Joseph. Everywhere else, he is simply Barnabas. And so the thought tonight in the beginning, and it will be the thought at the end, is everyone needs a Barnabas in his or her life. Edward Steichen. Edward Steichen was a photographer. At the age of 16, he fell in love with the idea of making photography his life. And so he took that love and he went and he bought a camera. And the first day he had that camera, he took 50 pictures. When they came back from the developer, 49 out of the 50 were awful. And his father looked at him and told him he was not a photographer, that 1 out of 50 was not good enough, and that he needed to look for something else. His mother looked at the one. It turned out to be a picture of his sister sitting at the piano. And she made the decision that that photograph was so perfect and so beautiful that it compensated for 49 failures. And she told him that he had found his life, that he had found his direction. At the peak of his career, he was the most famous photographer in the world. He was the highest paid photographer in the world. And in 2006, one of his photographs set a world record when it sold for $2.9 million. He was this close to giving away his camera and going another direction in life until his mother stepped in. Everyone needs a Barnabas. We are so good as a species at nitpicking each other to death, at finding the faults and exposing them, and breaking each other's spirits, that only God knows how many times we've crushed someone that could have been the very best in his or her field. Could have been a great orator, but maybe the first time he or she spoke, there was a stutter or a stammer. Someone insulted, and the spirit was crushed. Or how many times the first tryout for a play or a song recital or a dance recital didn't work out. And someone with tremendous talent that was just a little bit underneath the surface gave up. The question becomes, am I the kind of person who breaks spirits, or am I the kind of person who encourages? Am I the kind of person that sees only the failures and the flaws? Or am I the kind of person that can see past them to the jewel that's underneath? You see, Barnabas is that kind of individual. If you follow the career of Barnabas in the book of Acts, he goes from the one that we're introduced simply as one with some land who sells it and gives the money to the church, to what? He goes on to be the one that brings the Apostle Paul into the fold. Saul has obeyed the gospel. Saul has been preaching the gospel. Saul is a changed man, but the church at Jerusalem doesn't know it. When Paul comes to Jerusalem in Acts chapter 9, the church doesn't want anything to do with him. The apostles do not want anything to do with him. They're scared of him. But Barnabas takes him and he brings him into their number and he tells them who he is and what he's been doing. Now you think about that. How close are we in the book of Acts to not having the Apostle Paul that we know? How close are we to not having 13 of our New Testament books because there's no one to write them? If Barnabas is not there, do the others crush Paul's spirit? I don't know. It's certainly possible. Paul and Barnabas become really good friends. They travel together. They preach together. They encourage the church together. And then in chapter 15, they lock horns. They've had a young man traveling with them whose name is John Mark. And we've seen John Mark in the story of the book of Acts on and off. His family and then himself, and he's traveling with them. And during these travels, he decides that he's homesick. And he decides that he's going to go home. Well, in chapter 15, it's time to go out again, and Barnabas says, you know what, we need to take John Mark with us. And Paul says, absolutely not. He left me high and dry once. I am not taking him. And it says that there is a sharp disagreement between these two friends, so much so that they part ways. But guess who Barnabas takes with him when he travels? He takes John Mark. And it makes a difference in the young man's life because the encourager sees what he's capable of being. And it rolls around right at the end of Paul's life as he writes to a young man, Timothy. And he's begging Timothy to come spend some time with him before his death. And do you know what he says? He says, I need you to bring John Mark with you. He's good for me. What if Barnabas hadn't encouraged him? What if Barnabas had said, all right, Paul, you're the elder statesman here. You're the missionary to the Gentiles, and I kind of tag along with you sometimes, so we'll just leave John Mark out of this. What does he go on to become? I don't know. I'm just thankful that Barnabas was there for him, and in the end, Paul is too. Everyone needs a Barnabas, so much so that Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, right there at the end of that letter, when he's kind of closing things out, he writes in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, beginning in verse 11, therefore, encourage one another. Build up one another, just as you are already doing. Now we're going to request of you, brethren, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction. You esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Live in peace with one another. Now we urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, but encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with all men. You think Paul finally got the point? Do you think maybe by the end of 1 Thessalonians, Paul is realizing what Barnabas has done for him? And that we all need that at some time or another. Notice, in 3 verses, encourage and build up. Verse 11. Verse 12, show appreciation for other people. Then verse 13, encourage, help, and be patient. Not everybody steps into their role the first time and gets it right. Not everyone the first time has everything perfected about his gift or his hobby or his one-day profession. I remember the first time I spoke from the pulpit to deliver a full sermon, not a 2-minute devotional or something. And I remember all the encouragement that came my way. And I'm also honest enough to look back and understand that they were just patting me on the back and telling me I did a good job to encourage me. Because there wasn't a whole lot going on. Dickie and I joked not very long ago the difference in me today and me 22 years ago when the elders hired me. He goes, you weren't anywhere near the speaker that you are today. But they saw something and they trusted that the growth would take place. I needed that. You've needed it at some time. And so think about the people that work alongside us in the body of Christ. Think about the fact that Bible class teachers need encouraging. Think about the fact that the one who keeps our building clean needs encouraging. Those who write letters and send cards to visitors or to the sick need encouraging. The ones who make sure that our communion bags are ready for us every time we come in on Sunday. And the one who passes them out. They need encouraging. The one who runs our sound booth. Have you ever thought about the fact we never notice David is there until the system itself glitches? It's not David that glitches 99 times out of 100. It's the system. But the minute it glitches, we're all like... Song leaders need encouraging. You know, they don't always hit the right pitch. They don't always have the right tempo. But I don't want to do their job. Prayer leaders, communion leaders, our elders, our deacons, our children, our older people, our young families. Moms need encouraging, dads need encouraging, husbands need encouraging, wives need encouraging. There is no one who is exempt from the need to be encouraged from time to time. And the thing about it is, we could find fault with absolutely everyone. In everything that we do, there's always a little flaw because we're human. But that same individual could turn that around and find fault with me. We all need encouragement. We all need to be picked up because guess what? I generally know when I make a mistake. You don't have to tell me. I can spot it a lot of times before you do. And that's true with most of us. So rather than point it out, why not we overlook it, especially if it's inoffensive or nothing serious, and go to the encouraging part. So let's end with this. If the people around us, not everybody succumbs to it. Not everybody. You can pick someone, you can find fault with someone, and they're able to brush it off and go on. But not everybody can do that. So if the future leaders of the church are dependent upon my words, either of encouragement or discouragement, what does the future of the church look like? Am I helping build it? Or am I tearing it down now? Am I going to be partially at fault if someone with a gift never exercises it again because I overreacted to a mistake? God knew the day would come when our words could make the difference in someone's eternal destination. Because He writes in Hebrews chapter 3, encourage one another day after day, as long as it is still called today, so that none of you will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Think of the weight of that verse. The future of the Christians around me is determined, at least in part, by whether or not I encourage them on the road to heaven, or I discourage them, or I just leave them lying on the side of the road and go on about my business. Let's be encouragers. Let's be encouragers when no one else is looking. Let's be encouragers when maybe someone else is finding fault, and it may be legitimate fault. But when we can find something to encourage, let's do that and see what wonderful results can come from it. Who knows what gifts or abilities we can develop in each other if we look for them. If we look for the good and the positive and the growth. Maybe that you need some encouragement tonight. Might not have anything to do with the fact that somebody has said something discouraging to you, but this is just life. And life gets heavy. And sometimes life's hard to survive, and we just need other people to know, I need some words. I need a hug. I need a prayer. And so if that's something that you need in your life tonight, please let us know. And if you are teetering on the edge of giving up on a gift, or giving up on your faith, or you're teetering on the decision to obey the gospel or come back to God because you've wandered away, let this be an encouragement to you to do the right thing and be the right person as we stand and sing.